unhappiness, discontent, and misery we experience is caused only by our ignorance of who or what we really are. Therefore, if we want to be free of all misery and unhappiness, we must free ourselves from our ignorance of what we really are. That's a quote from Michael James in his book, Happiness and the Art of Being. Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today we'll be talking with Michael James, who is featured along with me in Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret. Michael James lived in Tiruvannamalai from 1976 to 1996, spending the first 8 years studying the teachings of Bhagavan Ramana under the clear guidance of one of his foremost disciples, Sri Sadhu Om, and assisting him in translating his teachings and in the translation of Bhagavan's own writings. What do you feel was the key message that Ramana Maharshi, or Bhagavan, was trying to communicate?
Who am I? To put it simply, but that needs more explanation.
Sure.
That is, what he taught us is that what we are all seeking is happiness, infinite and unalloyed happiness. But so long as we are seeking that happiness outside ourselves, we're always going to be disappointed, because happiness is our own real nature. So in order to experience the infinite happiness that we really are, we need to know what we actually are. And to know what we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves and surrender all false notions about ourselves.
And how do you do that?
Well, firstly, we need to understand what we're not before we can begin investigating what we are. So his teachings begin, like all Advaitic teachings, with what in the older texts is called neti neti. That means not this, not this. It's an intellectual analysis of our experience of ourselves. The basic, well, it can be explained in various ways, but I think the easiest...
Can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Is it really intellectual, or can it be more of a hard exploration?
It can. Yeah. I mean, in this path, the intellect and the heart are never completely divorced.
Yes.
But this is just the initial. This is before the actual investigation begins. The investigation is only with the heart, but first there needs to be a level of understanding on the mental level, because so long as we don't understand what we are not, if we investigate ourselves, we may be investigating the wrong thing. So now we all experience ourselves as a body and mind. Not as two separate things, but as a bundle, this body and mind. But if this body and mind were what we actually are, we could never experience ourselves without experiencing this body and mind. Regarding the body, now we experience ourselves as this body. But when we're dreaming, we experience ourselves as some other body. When dreaming, we're not at all aware of this body, because we mistake ourselves to be some other body. So since we're aware of ourselves in dream without being aware of this body cannot be what we actually are. Mm-hmm. With this body were what we actually are, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of it. So we are not this physical form. We are also not the mind, because though it's more or less the same mind that experiences both waking and dream, we are aware of ourselves in the absence of both body and mind in deep dreamless sleep. This is something that it's a very new idea to most people, because Advaita always talks about sleep as a state of awareness, because generally people believe sleep is a state of unconsciousness. We're not aware of anything in sleep. It is true we're not aware of anything. That is, there's no object of awareness. We don't experience any phenomena in sleep, but there is still a fundamental level of awareness, an awareness of our own existence. That is why if we were totally unaware in sleep, we wouldn't be aware there was any such state. We'd just be aware of an unbroken succession of states of waking and dream. But we are aware, but between states of waking and dream, there are also a third state, a state in which we are not aware of anything. That the fact that we are aware of having been in a state in which we were not aware of anything means we were aware of our existence in that state. Of course, our existence is not an object of our awareness. So that is the basic non-dual awareness, the basic awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. That is our condition in sleep. So since we exist in sleep without being aware of this body or mind or any phenomenon whatsoever, we cannot be any of these things. So we are just that fundamental awareness I am, the awareness of our own existence. That is what we actually are. So this is the initial rational or intellectual analysis. But
Sure.
then this tells us what we are
But
not.
even that's a revelation, isn't it? When people see that, isn't that a revelation?
It is certainly a revelation, but merely understanding that doesn't solve our problems.
Oh yes, just thinking about it, of course.
Yeah, and it helps a lot. It helps a lot because it helps us to be more detached from the experiences of life, but it doesn't entirely solve the problem, because though we understand, but we are not this body or mind, we still experience ourselves as this body or mind. So the mere understanding on the mental level is not sufficient. It has to be a clear experience of what we actually are. We need to actually experience ourselves as pure awareness. In order to experience ourselves as pure awareness, we need to investigate ourselves. This is what Bhagavan called the practice of Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara, it's often translated as self-inquiry, but it's self-inquiry in the sense of self-investigation. That is, it's not just asking questions, it's actually investigating ourselves. So how do we investigate ourselves? Simply by turning our attention inwards to face ourselves alone. In other words, we try to be aware just of this basic awareness, this fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. When we try to do so, because the natural inclination of the mind is to go outwards, to grasp other things, when we try to turn within, our mind keeps on trying to come outwards. So this is where letting go comes in.
Yes.
Letting go, but it's letting go at a very deep level. We have to let go of everything. But letting go is not a separate process to this investigation. That is, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby letting go of other things. We are ceasing to be aware of other things.
Yes.
When we start off with this practice, our power of attention is relatively gross, because we are used to attending to phenomena, to objects, to things other than ourselves. We are now trying to use the same power of attention to know the subtlest of all subtle things, which is our mere being, our mere existence, our fundamental awareness, I am. So at first, we are not able to completely withdraw our attention from all other things. But the more we practice this, the more our power of attention is refined and clarified. So we are more clearly able to distinguish the fundamental awareness from all the adjuncts that we now mistake to be ourself. So it's a process of going of a deepening of the intensity and clarity of our self-attentiveness.
That's a good explanation. Thank you. So what stages are there stages people go through in that process, and what are the signposts?
Well, it is a process, but there are no clearly marked stages. That is, as we progress in this path, the strength of our inclination to go outwards gets reduced, and we become more and more, we develop more and more love just to be quiet, just to be as we actually are, which is as that mere awareness I am. So there is a definite progression, but it is not there are no signs, because any sign is something other than ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So the only sign is the deepening of the clarity of self-awareness and the increasing detachment and freedom from concern about other things.
Well, but that's a big signpost.
Yeah, yes. But also we can't easily, it's not something we can easily measure, because during this process, the mind is gradually being purified. Purified means its inclination to go outwards is getting reduced. So as the mind gets purified, it also gets clarified. And as the mind gets clarified, we become more clearly aware of the existing impurities. Just like if you've got a very dirty cloth, you can't pick out all the stains on it because the whole cloth is dirty. But when you start washing it, you remove the more superficial dirt, and the deeper stains become more clearly visible. Likewise, in this process, as we go deeper in this path, we become more and more clearly aware of the strength of our desires and attachments, and generally our inclination to go outwards. So because we are able to perceive more clearly the extent of our desire and attachment, sometimes it may seem that we're going backwards when actually we're going forwards.
Yes. I can see that would make people discouraged, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily, because I think one can feel, because one thing in this path, that Bhagavan described it in two ways. He described it as self-investigation. He also described it as self-surrender.
Yes.
Because to the extent to which we turn our attention within, that extent we are letting go of other things. So that is the surrender aspect of it. So self-surrender and self-investigation are actually inseparable. And the more we surrender, the less we are affected by outward things. That we don't change what, as Bhagavan said, what is destined to happen is going to happen. We can't change what is destined to happen, but we are less affected. I mean, all of us, in the life of any embodied being, there are troubles come and troubles go. I mean, our life is a mixture of pleasure and pain. So all sorts of challenges we face in this embodied state in which we now are living. But the more detached we become, the less we become affected by all the external troubles. So and consequently we experience more and more peace inwardly.
Yes.
So
and that's again that's back to the signpost. That's another signpost. Both things that there isn't it that you're less caught up in the externals,
Yeah.
and there is more peace.
Yes, yes, yes. But these are very subtle things.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, you can miss them if you're still
yeah,
caught up at
yeah.
all in
And
the external world, wouldn't you say?
and also it's but because if an analogy Bhagavan sometimes used to give, if you've got dirty water that is constantly being stirred, the dirt will be spread throughout the water. But when you leave the water, the dirt settles down. But oh, sorry, no. What I was
Take
going
your
to
time.
say?
That's
Sorry,
fine.
yeah. Sorry. But as the water, or let's say the dirt is light. So as the water is less agitated, the dirt floats to the surface. So as we go deeper in the path, deeper levels of what are called vasanas. Vasanas means inclinations. That is
Yes.
the subtle form, the seed form of our desires, attachments, likes, dislikes, fears, and so on. So these, as we go deeper in the path, deeper levels of vasanas come to the surface. So sometimes it seems to us we are very calm and very peaceful and everything is going well. And suddenly more is churned up from within.
Yes.
And it sometimes seemed, oh, I thought I was no longer perturbed by these things, but suddenly I'm perturbed by them again. But this is all part of the process of the cleansing process. So there are, as I say, there are signs, but the signs are subtle, and they often we shouldn't read too much into the signs. I mean, we can take the general thing. So long as we are trying our best to follow this path, we are on the right. We're going in the right direction.
Yes.
Sometimes it seems that old vasanas come churning up to the surface of the mind, and things that we thought no longer agitated us do agitate us all of a sudden.
Yes.
But it's not a clear linear. I mean, we are progressing,
definitely.
but the signs are not a clear linear.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. So what do you do when these things arise in consciousness, when they rise to the surface?
Right. Well, we have to let them go, and we let them go by. That is the nature of vasanas. When they rise to the center of, to the surface of our mind. Actually, Bhagavan used a more precise word than vasana. He often used the term Vishaya vasana. Vishaya vasana means the inclination to be aware of phenomena. So when these rise to the surface.
Say a little bit more about that, please.
Okay.
I know you're using a kind of a technical term, so I'd like us to really define it. And I actually never heard that before. And I've read a lot of, I'm sure I've seen it, but I never noticed that before. So can you explain that in depth, or a little more depth, please?
Vishaya is a Sanskrit word. It means object or phenomena. So and vasana means an inclination or a tendency or a propensity. So a Vishaya vasana is an inclination to attend to phenomena.
Yes.
But basically, there are two types of vasana. The inclination to attend to ourself is called sat vasana. Sat means what is real or being or existence. Yes. So since we are the fundamental existent, attending to ourself is called satvasana. Whereas that is the inclination to attend to ourselves is called satvasana, whereas the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves is called a Vishaya vasana. Yes. And of course, there are many Vishaya vasanas, or we can collectively call them Vishaya vasana, but we have each of us have particular inclination to desire certain things, to like certain things, to be afraid of certain things. So it may vary from individual to individual, but it's not what we have an inclination to attend to is not important. It's the fact, it's the strength of the inclination to attend to anything else, which is the obstacle. So as we progress on this path, our Vishaya Vasanas, because we are constantly trying to turn our attention inwards, our inclination to go outwards loses its strength. To put it in a very simple way, at every moment in our life, we have a fundamental choice. Do we attend to things other than ourselves? In other words, do we allow our attention or mind to go outwards, or do we attend only to ourselves? In other words, to allow our attention to go inwards. So at every moment in our life, we are faced with that. We have that choice. Generally, because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, we allow our mind to go outwards and to wander under the sway of these Vasanas. But every time we try to turn within, to turn our attention back towards ourselves, we are weakening the inclination to go outwards. So the more we persevere in this practice, the weaker our Vishaya Vasanas will become. And the weaker they become, the easier it will be for us to go deeper within.
Mm-hmm. That's clear, yes.
So basically, we let go of other things by clinging to ourselves.
Great.
Because this is another thing I wanted to say.
Oh, please.
That is, Bhagavan has identified that the root of all problems is ego. What he means by ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this body, and which is consequently aware of other things. So ego is the subject or perceiver, and all other things are objects or things perceived by us. So the nature of ego, in one verse he says, he describes the ego as a formless phantom ego. And he says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. That means leaving one form, it grasps another form. If sought, it takes flight. This is in this verse, Bhagavan has encapsulated what he revealed. I mean, he often said this, but he put it particularly, he put it in a very aphoristic way in this verse, though he often explained it in more detail. That is, the nature of ego is to hold on to things other than itself. The first thing it holds on to, the first thing it attaches itself to, is a body. And only when it attaches itself to the body and experiences that body as I. And only when it experiences the body as I, is it able to be aware of other forms. And then the mind is constantly feeding on forms. What he means by forms is not just gross forms. Any phenomena, no matter how subtle, is a form of one kind or another. So he basically, the term form that he uses there is a synonym for phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So the nature of the mind is to be constantly grasping phenomena. So that it's from this basic tendency of the ego, but all desires, attachments, and so on arise. Since the nature of the ego is always grasping, that is to put it in other words, desire and attachment are the very nature of ego. Since the ego is always grasping, rather than grasping anything else which nourishes and sustains ego, if we try and grasp ourselves, ego will thereby subside. That is what he means by saying, if sought, it takes flight. That is, ego is not something we ever see. We seem to be ego so long as we are allowing our attention to go outwards. But when we turn our attention back within to see what we actually are, we never actually find any such thing as ego. That is, to the extent we attend to ourselves, to that extent does ego subside. So this practice that he taught us is a practice that can go on throughout the day. Throughout our waking and dream states, if we have enough love for it, because the nature of ego, so long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we are nourishing and feeding ego. When we, in order to...
But how do we interrupt that flow when we catch it? Is it just by turning within, or
turning our attention within?
Is there any questions you use, or any?
Sometimes Bhagavan suggests, well, he didn't exactly suggest questioning, but he gave clues in which he used questions. So we can use those questions as aids to turn our attention back. For example, whatever thought or phenomenon appears, it appears to whom? To me. So whatever we are aware of, anything other than ourselves that we are aware of, if we use it properly, we can use it as a reminder to turn our attention back towards ourselves. That's any thought or desire or anguish or anything that arises. To whom is this? To me. And so our attention is turned back towards ourselves.
But do you just stay with to me, or do you take it deeper beyond that? Because is that me actually real, or is that?
Yeah, well, to me is pointing us in the direction. That is, we turn our attention back towards ourselves. But that me is obviously ego. Mm-hmm. But as I said, the nature of ego is such that it rises and flourishes by attending to other things. When it attends to itself, when I say it, I'm talking about I. So I rise and flourish as ego by attending to things other than myself. When I turn my attention back towards myself, I, as ego, subside back into the source from which I rose. The source from which I rose is that fundamental awareness that I was talking about earlier, the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. And Bhagavan, to explain the distinction between ego and our real nature, Bhagavan said, our real nature is that fundamental awareness, I am. Whereas ego is that same fundamental awareness, I am, mixed with adjuncts. So as ego, we're always aware I am, but we're never aware of ourselves just as I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person, I am Michael. So that is the I am is mixed with adjuncts. Those adjuncts are not what we actually are, but what we mistake ourselves to be. So so long as we allow our attention outwards, we are clinging on to those adjuncts. When we turn our attention back within, we are trying to attend just to the mere awareness I am. So to the extent that we attend to that mere awareness I am, we are withdrawing our attention from the adjuncts, and so they slip off. That is why ego subsides to the extent to which we attend to ourselves.
Great. And how is there anything else you can do to support this?
Some people like to hold on to other practices, but actually, if we are firmly convinced of the efficacy of this practice, in a sense, this practice contains all other practices within it.
Yes.
So it's a matter of personal preference, but my own experience is, having understood and been firmly convinced, not only, also by experience, by putting this into practice, that it increases the conviction, but actually nothing else is necessary. But the nature of the mind is to go outwards and cling to other things. We need to be constantly diverting it back and trying to cling to ourselves. The more we cling to ourselves, the more we let go of other things. The more we let go of other things, the more calm and peaceful and happy we are. So it's a bit like how to say, it's a bug. Once you've caught it, you can't get rid of it.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
but the more you practice it, the more you feel drawn to practice it.
I got it. And is there anything that you would recommend to the people listening to this as something, either something they can start exploring, a way to begin this process? How would you recommend that?
Well, I think having a very clear understanding of what Bhagavan has taught us is a great help. Firstly, it clarifies in our mind what we are trying to do and what we are trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it encourages us, but this is the only truly worthwhile undertaking in life. That is, whatever else we seek to achieve in life, it's all transitory. Nothing that we achieve in life. We know one day this body is going to go away, and we're going to, whatever we may have achieved in this life is going to depart and is no longer, I mean, we're going to be separated from it. So all other achievements are transitory and
yes.
impermanent. Whereas this achievement is, we are seeking to experience the eternal happiness that we always actually are. So long as we rise as ego, we cannot experience that eternal happiness, because instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this. But the happiness that we actually are is just that fundamental awareness I am. So the more clearly we understand Bhagavan's teachings, the more encouragement and the more motivation we have to put this into practice.
Yeah.
You asked about other things we can do to support this. One thing Bhagavan often stressed, he often used to say, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means love, generally in the sense of love for God or devotion to God.
Yes.
But in a deeper sense, it means that devotion for what is real, that love for what is real,
yes,
which
yes.
is our own nature. And
can you also, for our audience, can you also define the term jnana?
Yes, I was just going to say, jnana is generally translated as knowledge, but it's not knowledge in the sense that we usually understand it. I think in most contexts, a more appropriate translation of jnana is awareness. But in some contexts, jnana can mean knowledge of other things, but in this context, it means atmajnana, that is self-awareness. That is the pure awareness of ourself as we actually are.
Great.
So that jnana in this context means pure awareness. So Bhagavan said, basically when he said bhakti is the mother of jnana, it means love is the mother of pure awareness, because without all-consuming love for this, we won't be willing to let go of everything else. And until we're willing to let go of everything else, we can't experience ourselves as we actually are. Because what we actually are is pure awareness, and pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. But there's no need to be aware of anything other than ourselves, because what we actually are, is infinite happiness. And why do we allow our attention to go outwards towards other things? Because we still believe, but our happiness and unhappiness is dependent on other things. We think other things cause our unhappiness, and if we remove the things that cause us to be unhappy and achieve the things that cause us to be happy, we think that's a way to achieve happiness. But according to Bhagavan, the happiness that we seem to experience, if, for example, we have a desire for something, we have a desire for a tasty meal or a newer car or a bigger apartment or whatever we may have a desire for.
Yes.
Any desire agitates the mind. So long as we have a desire for anything, to the extent we have desire for anything, we are dissatisfied, and dissatisfaction clouds over the 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 happiness which is our own real nature. So when we get the tasty meal we want, or the new car that we want, temporarily we seem to be satisfied. That is, we've got what we want. That agitation on the surface of the mind is calmed down. Because that agitation is calmed down, we experience pleasure. But the pleasure we experience isn't coming from the food, it isn't coming from the car, it isn't coming from the bigger apartment or the pay rise or from anything else. It's coming from within us.
Yes.
Bhagavan used an analogy to illustrate this. He said, a dog once went to a cremation ground and it was looking for a bone. And finally it found an old dry bone. And it was such a dry bone that it had no juice, no pulp left in it. And when the dog chewed on it, it splintered. But the dog was so ravenously hungry, but it was chewing on this bone, hoping to get something. And because the bone was splintering, it was cutting the dog's mouth. So when the dog dropped the bone, it saw blood on it and it licked the blood and said, oh, this bone is very, very tasty bone. And it went on chewing the bone. But the blood it was tasting was only its own blood. Nothing was coming from the bone. It was coming only from within itself. Likewise, the happiness that we seem to achieve by fulfilling our desires for things other than ourselves is not actually coming from those things. It's coming only from within us. Because we ourselves are happiness, we ourselves are infinite happiness. So, but because we seem to derive happiness by getting the things we like and avoiding the things we dislike, our mind is constantly going outwards, trying to experience things that we like and to avoid things that we dislike. Yes. But the happiness all along is there within us, so we are looking in the wrong direction.
Yes,
so
yes.
The more we understand and are convinced that happiness is our own real nature and can be experienced only by turning our attention within to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, the more inclination we will have the more love we will have to turn within, and the more our inclination to go outwards will be weakened.
Very good. Very good.
And
go ahead.
For people, one more thing. For many people who come to the spiritual path, they come from a religious background. That is, yes. They have some sort of belief in God. So Advaita caters for such people, because what Advaita points out is, what is God? God is the one infinite whole. Since God is the infinite whole, infinite in every conceivable way, God is infinite, that which is there can be nothing other than that which is infinite. That is, if we were anything other than God, God would thereby be limited. So there is nothing, since God is the infinite whole, he is actually our own real nature. That is, God is that which is always shining in us as I am. God is that fundamental awareness, I am. This is why in the in the Upanishads, there are what they call Mahavakyas, great sayings, all of which point out our oneness with Brahman, which Brahman means God in the most abstract sense.
Yes.
So there's one of them says Tattvamasi, that you are, that is what you actually are. Another one says Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Another one says Ayam Atma Brahman, this self is Brahman. And another one says Prajnanam Brahman, that's pure awareness is Brahman. So it's there in the Upanishads. Bhagavan pointed out it's also there in the Bible. But the name of God in the Old Testament is I am. When Moses asked God, who shall I, when God said, go and lead my people out of Egypt, then Moses said, who shall I say has sent me? God replied from a burning bush, I am that I am. And then he said, tell them that I am has sent you. So since then, because of that, in the ancient Hebrew tradition, I am is the most sacred name of God. And it's the unutterable name, which is why in the view of the scribes and other the priests and so on, when Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am, that was blasphemy. Because to use I am without any, to say, if he had said I am Jesus, that wouldn't be wrong. But to say I am without any adjunct, for them, that is taking the name of God in vain. And the implication of his saying, before Abraham was I am, that's clearly implying that he is one with that I am, which is the real nature of God. So for them, that was blasphemy. And there are a number of sayings in the Bible where Jesus uses the word I am without any, without for example, when they asked him shortly before he was arrested and taken on trial, they asked him, are you the Messiah? And he said, I am. In some translations, like the King James translation, they say, I am he. But actually the words in the original Greek Testament or New Testament, Gospels, is he simply answered, I am. That is why they arrested him, because for them to say I am, that is identifying himself with God. So,
except he wasn't pointing at himself personally. He was pointing at that which we all are, right?
Which we all are, yes. But that subtlety was lost on them.
Yes,
but, I mean, because
with not very good result for that particular body mind.
But I mean, often religious people they fail to understand the depth of the teachings that they themselves are holding in such regard.
Yes.
So,
well, we as human beings interpret everything through our filters and our tendencies and desires. So we're seeing what we're projecting as opposed to seeing what is. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. But anyway, that what I said about Bhagavan, that's a slight digression. But the point is, according to Bhagavan, what is God? God is that which is shining in our heart as I am. So the highest devotion to God is to attend just to I am. So long as Bhagavan said, so long as we take ourselves to be a body, to have a name and form, it's appropriate to worship God in name and form. That is, when we allow our mind to go outwards, we can worship external forms as God. But the best of all ways of worshiping God is to worship him as he actually is, which is as that mere awareness I am. So by turning our attention within, that is the highest of all, the highest worship of God, the highest expression of devotion to God, because then we are attending to God as he actually is.
Perfect. That's a good place to leave it. Unless do you have anything else you want to add before we move on?
I'll just say one thing, because I mentioned Bhagavan described this part of his practice of self-investigation. He also described it as the practice of self-surrender.
Yes.
In one, there's a text called Who Am I?, which is Bhagavan wrote an essay based on questions and answers that were someone many years earlier had, when Bhagavan was just about 20 or 21, a person called Shiva Pillai had come and asked him a series of questions.
Oh, you're going to need to repeat that. You dropped out for a second, so just repeat that last piece.
A person called Shiva Pillai came to Bhagavan in about 1900, 1901, 1902, around that time. So Bhagavan was aged just 20, 21. And the first question that Shiva Pillai asked Bhagavan was, who am I? And then he asked a series of questions. The fact that he asked that, the first question he asked was, who am I? Illustrates that what a perfect disciple he was, because at that time, nobody knew that what Bhagavan had come to this world to teach was the investigation, who am I? Mm-hmm. But when he asked this question, that shows that he was fully attuned to his guru. So the subsequent questions he asked were all very deep and very pertinent questions. So for more than 20 years, that work was, nobody knew about those questions and answers until finally an excerpt from them was published. And then everyone wanted to know more. So then it was published in a question and answer form. And Bhagavan himself then wrote it in an essay form. So that work is called Who Am I? And that is one of the, that's one of the best introductions to his teachings. In that work, Who Am I? There's one sentence in which Bhagavan says, giving not even, that is, I'll slightly paraphrase it because that'll be easier to understand. That is basically what that sentence implies is being so keenly self-attentive, but one gives not even the slightest room to the rising of any other thought, is giving oneself to God. In other words, he defines surrender, self-surrender, so giving ourselves to God, as being so keenly self-attentive, but we give no room for rising of any other thought. That means we don't allow our attention to go away towards anything else. We fix it on ourselves. Because God is that which is shining in us as I am, by clinging to I am, we are clinging to God and thereby giving ourselves to God. The more keenly and deeply we attend to I am, the more this ego, our seemingly separate existence is dissolved. And eventually, when we are aware of I am alone, ego will be eradicated. And what will remain, that is the pure awareness, which is what is often referred to as God, but is obviously beyond all personal concepts of God.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Michael James on happiness and the practice of self-investigation and self-surrender. To learn more about Michael James, his book, Happiness and the Art of Being, his teachings, and his vast writings, visit his website, happinessofbeing.com. That's www.happinessofbeing.com. If you've enjoyed these podcasts, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona method, please visit Sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to Sedona.com. That's Sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.